In September 1983, under cover of darkness, 14 semi-trucks loaded with crushed plastic cartridges drove into the desert outside Alamogordo, New Mexico. They dumped millions of video game cartridges into a city landfill, covered them in concrete, and smoothed over the sand. For 30 years, people called it an urban legend. Until 2014, when excavators dug up the site and uncovered hundreds of thousands of crushed game cartridges, including what many consider the worst video game ever created, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. How does a company that created an industry, a company that went from $0 to $2 billion in revenue faster than any corporation in American history, end up secretly burying millions of unsold products in the desert? This is the story of Atari, the rise, the hubris, and the catastrophic collapse that nearly killed the entire video game industry. In 1972, a charismatic engineer named Nolan Bushnell and his business partner Ted Dabney founded Atari in Sunnyvale, California. Their first creation was Pong, a simple table tennis simulator consisting of 2 white paddles and a bouncing square dot on a black screen. Bushnell installed the first prototype in a local bar called Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale. Within 2 days, the machine broke down because its coin box was overflowing with quarters. Pong was an instant phenomenon, creating the commercial arcade industry virtually overnight. In 1977, Atari launched the Atari 2600, a home console that used interchangeable ROM cartridges instead of built-in games. It turned video games from an arcade novelty into a living room essential. Kids across America begged for an Atari for Christmas. Classics like Space Invaders, Asteroids, and Pitfall defined youth culture in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Atari became the fastest-growing company in U.S. history, controlling over 80% of the home video game market. In 1976, Nolan Bushnell sold Atari to media giant Warner Communications for $28 million to secure capital for the Atari 2600 rollout. It was a culture clash of epic proportions. Bushnell's Atari was famous for its wild, counterculture Silicon Valley atmosphere, hot tubs in executive offices, beer-fueled brainstorming sessions, and jeans-wearing engineers who worked all night. Warner Communications brought in Ray Kassar, a suit-wearing former textile executive, to run the company. Kassar treated game developers not as creative artists, but as factory assembly line workers. He refused to give programmers royalties, bonuses, or even credit on game boxes. Frustrated by Kassar's management, Atari's top programmers quit in 1979 to form Activision, the world's first independent third-party video game publisher. Atari sued Activision to stop them, but lost. The court ruling opened the floodgates. Anyone could now make and sell video game cartridges for the Atari 2600 without Atari's permission or quality control. By 1982, the video game market was flooded with hundreds of terrible, low-quality games, a phenomenon known as shovelware. Dog food companies, cereal brands, and speculative investor groups rushed to publish cheap games on Atari cartridges. Store shelves were overflowing with broken, unplayable titles. Consumers had no way of knowing which games were good and which were unplayable garbage. Atari itself made 2 catastrophic corporate decisions driven by greed and overconfidence. First, Atari acquired the home console rights to Pac-Man, the most popular arcade game in the world. Even though there were only 10 million Atari 2600 consoles in existence, Atari manufactured 12 million Pac-Man cartridges, believing the game would force millions of people to buy new consoles. But the port was rushed and visually terrible. Atari sold 7 million copies, but millions were returned by angry customers, leaving millions of unsold cartridges in warehouses. Then came E.T. In July 1982, CEO Ray Kassar negotiated a deal with director Steven Spielberg to license the blockbuster movie E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial for a staggering $21 million. Because Kassar wanted the game on store shelves for the 1982 Christmas shopping season, he gave lead programmer Howard Scott Warshaw just 5 weeks to design and code the entire game from scratch. a process that normally took 6 months to a year. Warsaw worked non-stop in a feverish rush. The result was a frustrating, cryptic game where players constantly fell into unavoidable green pits. Atari manufactured 5 million ET cartridges for Christmas 1982. It sold roughly 1.5 million copies. Millions more were returned by furious parents and children. Atari was stuck with millions of unwanted ET and Pac-Man cartridges sitting in warehouses, while retailers refused to order any more stock. In December 1982, Warner Communications shocked Wall Street by announcing that Atari's fourth-quarter earnings would fall far short of expectations. Warner's stock crashed 33% in a single day. The dam broke. In 1983, the entire North American home video game market collapsed. Total industry revenue plunged from $3.2 billion in 1982 to less than $100 million in 1985, a staggering 97% drop. Toy stores and department stores pulled video games off their shelves entirely, declaring video games a dead fad. Atari was losing over $2 million every single day. In September 1983, Atari quietly dispatched 14 semi-trucks filled with unsold cartridges, consoles, and broken equipment to the Alamogordo landfill in New Mexico. Workers crushed the cartridges, poured concrete over the trenches, and walked away. In July 1984, Warner Communications, desperate to cut its bleeding losses, split Atari into 2 pieces and sold them off. The consumer home division was sold to Jack Tramiel, the aggressive founder of Commodore, who had just been ousted from his own company. Tramiel renamed it Atari Corporation and pivoted to manufacturing low-cost home computers like the Atari ST, but it never recaptured the magic or market share of the console era. The arcade division was spun off as Atari Games, changing hands multiple times over the subsequent decades. By the 1990s, the Atari brand was a ghost, passed between holding companies, licensing firms, and French publisher Infogrames, which rebranded itself as Atari SA to ride on nostalgia. The company that created modern gaming was reduced to a brand logo on t-shirts and retro mini-consoles. Atari did not fail because people stopped liking video games. It failed because it treated a creative medium like cheap plastic commodity goods. When Nintendo launched the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America in 1985, it learned every lesson from Atari's collapse. Nintendo instituted the official Nintendo Seal of Quality, strictly limited third-party publishers, and built security chips into cartridges to prevent unauthorized shovelware. Nintendo rebuilt the industry on the ashes of Atari's mistakes. In 2014, when documentarians excavated the Alamogordo landfill, they dug up 1,300 intact cartridges of E.T., Pac-Man, and Centipede. One copy of E.T. sold at auction for over $1,500, a poetic ending for a game that almost destroyed an industry. Atari created the world of gaming. It built the first digital playground, gave millions of kids their first joystick, and proved that virtual worlds could capture human imagination. It flew too high on greed and hubris and fell into a desert pit. But the fire it started burns in every console, PC, and smartphone on Earth today.